Look, put yourself in President Trump's shoes, okay? First of all, he's an idiot, straight up idiot, doesn't know anything about anything. And now you're dealing with Iran. For, 25 years now, the American people have been told the Iranians are trying to build a nuclear weapon, that the Iranians are bad. And how do we reinforce the idea that the Iranians are bad? So the average American is just, all I have to do is play a couple movies. Maybe I can get Ben Affleck to make a movie about rescue. Oh, he did that already. And people watch that and they just are inherently afraid. Maybe I can get Sally Fields to do a movie about them kidnapping. It's been done. We make all sorts of movies that make the Iranians look like the worst people in the world. And now you have President Trump, and you want him to stand up and tell the truth to the American people? Then he has to explain. The Iranians don't have a nuclear weapon. Mr. President, yeah, what about that 60% enriched uranium? That's not really weapons grade. Mr. President, but do they have any use for that 60% enriched uranium? No, there is no viable use. I believe they're using as leverage against this negotiating table. Mr. President, why would they want to do leverage unless they really wanted a nuclear weapon? Mr. President, they stopped counting centrifuges 2 years ago. Do we know where all the centrifuges are? Mr. President, if we don't know where all the centrifuges are, if you're explaining, you're losing. There's an answer for this. You have to, if you know your stuff, you can negotiate. But do the people want to listen? Do they want to hear? Do they want this data? I do. You do. A handful of people out there, the facts are important. But for the average American who gets up in the morning, goes to work, comes home at night, drinks a beer, watches TV, goes to bed, repeat, rinse all over again, they don't want to sit there and listen to Scott Ritter spout out technological and technical mumbo jumbo, because all they have to do, I found this out when I was having done weapons inspection in Iraq for 7 years. I resigned on principle, making the case that the U.S. was selling a false case for war. And so the American public is preconditioned into believing anything negative about Iran. And now, so we accept at face value the notion that the Iranians are trying to illegally acquire technology to produce a nuclear weapon. And it's been political generation after political generation buying into this, because the American people aren't programmed to accept that argument. I know. I went before the American people and articulated till my face was blue that Iraq didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Every word I said was proven true because it was the truth. I lived it for 7 years. But didn't matter. All Rush Limbaugh had to come out and go, Scott Ritter, he drank that Kool-Aid, baby. Oh, yeah, Scott Ritter drank the Kool-Aid. Nope, Saddam's got weapons of mass destruction. And all the Rush Limbaugh fans out there went, yep, Iraq's got weapons of mass destruction because Rush Limbaugh told me. That's how it is with Iran. And Mark Levine, all Mark Levine has to do is come, them Iranians are building a nuclear weapon. There it is. It came from Mark Levine. It's got to be true. Doesn't matter that we can get people out there and say, no, Donald Trump's not in the business of explaining to the American people. He's in the business of taking the path of least resistance to achieve an outcome that's most favorable for the promotion of Donald Trump. He doesn't want to go down in history as the man who facilitated an Iranian uranium enrichment program that the American people have been told for 25 years represents an existential threat to the United States and the world. That's not Donald Trump's job. He wants to go down in history as the man who solved the problem that nobody else could solve for 25 years, the Iranian nuclear program, by eliminating it, not by saying, yeah, let's let it live and prosper and do whatever it wants to do because they're allowed to do it under Article 4 of the NPT. Donald Trump doesn't even know what Article 4 of the NPT is. That's where we're at right now. And it's a shame that the United States has come to this, where we're literally being led by a moron who's surrounded by lesser morons, none of them who know anything about anything. These are just yes men and women, with some exceptions, who tell the president what he wants to hear so that the president feels better about himself. This has nothing to do with the legitimate national security interests of America, promoting America's economic benefit, making the world a safer place to live in. It has everything to do with making sure that Donald Trump can be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. First of all, I think one of the reasons why J.D. Vance is laying low right now is because of the Epstein controversy. And he doesn't want, and I don't think Trump wants it to spill over on him. And so you keep the vice president out of these things. Although I guess there's a meeting right now with J.D. Vance about releasing the transcripts or the recordings of the most recent meeting between the federal deputy attorney general of the United States and Ghislaine Maxwell. So who knows? But yeah, J.D. Vance was always going to fight an uphill battle trying to become relevant under Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a narcissist. He's the only one that counts. Donald Trump doesn't share power. Donald Trump doesn't delegate. And Vance will be given an opportunity here, an opportunity there to shy. But look at Vance went to Munich and spoke to the Munich Security Council, and you have people, security conference, and you have people saying that, what a speech. That's one of the greatest speeches made in that conference since Vladimir Putin took down the House in 2007. Normally a president would say, my vice president went out there and kicked ass and I'm very good. Trump's like, you're not allowed to shine brighter than this star. So we're going to bring you back here and we're going to snuff out the light. You don't get to go out and play anymore. And that's one of J.D. Vance's problems, is that he is a tool, but the president doesn't want to give the tool credit for anything. The only good news from the Trump perspective is that the Democrats are so god awful that they, even in an environment where they should be thriving and gaining votes and having their voice heard, they're still losing popularity because they're just that bad. They're so bad that they're losing popularity at a greater rate than Donald Trump, who's very bad. Donald Trump is not a man of character. He's not a man of courage. So he's going to take the path of least resistance. And that's the mastery of AIPAC and the whole pro-Israeli lobby, is that they have made life easier for those who support the cause of Israel. And they make life harder for those who go against it. And Donald Trump is a man that believes in taking the easy path. Look at tariffs. There's no master stroke here. He's just throwing out random numbers and then changing them and going on. Not because if he truly believed in something, he could articulate the stance he believed in. He could go out there, defend it. He could withstand the opposition. But he just tells lies. I'm gonna generate enough tariff-based income to make sure that Americans who earn less than $200,000 a year don't ever have to pay income tax again. And everybody goes, really? Oh, that's it. Get back to that. Don't pay taxes again. Not anything about Israel, Gaza, and all that. We don't have to pay taxes again. This is the code that Donald Trump has broken, as he plays to the lowest common denominator, and he can shift as the days on because the political memory of these people is zero. He just has to keep saying the right words. He'll refine his message, his lies. That's where we're at. It's not that the Israeli lobby controls Donald Trump. I don't believe they do. I believe that Donald Trump is such a weak man that he takes the path of least resistance, and the Israeli lobby provides the path of least resistance. The United States already has a problem where we've allowed ideology to infiltrate foreign policy to the extent now that every president ends up getting us a knee-jerk all over the place. Trump's only around for 3 more years. And then what? So the Indians let's say Trump made me the negotiator. I went there and I found all the solutions. And I'm sitting there with the Indians. All right, this is what we're going to do. Boom, boom. And they're going to look at me and go, Scott, we think you're an honest guy. And this is a really interesting thing you've put forward here. But you work for Donald Trump and he disappears in 3 years. And what guarantees can you give me that the person that replaces Donald Trump is going to think this is a good idea? And you can't give a guarantee. I think J.D. Vance is going to be, I can't guarantee that. Can't guarantee anything in the American. And so the Indians are like, no, even though what you said sounds good, no. We're going with long-term stability. We're going with people we trust. But because everything you're doing, Scott, is going to be based upon an executive order, because you're not turning it into a treaty with Congress. And even if you did turn it into a treaty with Senate ratification, we see how the United States treats treaties. You just throw them away. And they're inconvenient, and then we'll become inconvenient again. So the president will do everything based upon an executive order, which is immediately reversible the moment a new president comes in. You're right. I apologize for even injecting the possibility of America coming up with something clever. We can't, because we're the worst people in the world to deal with. We stand for nothing. We are nothing, and nobody should ever trust us. Trump had BRICS on the ropes. Just take a look at the last BRICS summit. It was held in Brazil. Lula wasn't able to advance very aggressive policies because there was domestic pushback saying, no, India's sitting there having a tussle with China, and India's on the ropes. We're not really all in on this thing anymore. If I were Donald Trump, I would have went, I need to incentivize Brazil and India. We have $1 trillion defense budget. I would have declared a national emergency, and I would have gone to India. And I said, what are you paying for Russian oil? How much Russian oil are you buying? All right, I'm going to work it. You're going to get all the oil you need at the price you need. I'm going to sell you subsidized American oil. We're going to get other people to sell you subsidized oil. We're going to meet the Russian price, but you don't buy Russian oil anymore. You buy from us. What can the Russians do at that point in time? You didn't sanction them. You just did better business. Now the Russians come in and go, we're going to cut our price even more. Isn't that what Trump just said he wanted? I want a $10 drop. Isn't that the cap that the Europeans said they wanted? We want to put a cap on how much money the Russians make off of oil. Instead of spending billions on weaponry that gets thrown out, you want to starve the Russians out. You're not going to do it with China, but with India, who went from buying 3 to 4% of their oil came from Russia a couple of years ago to 40% this last year. No, just subsidize alternative oil. Subsidize it. Make it competitive. It costs us money, but I thought the goal was to break the Russians. That's how I would have broken the Russians. I would have just said, yep, they need the oil. Let's make it impossible. And doing the secondary sanctioning, it costs money. It's an investment. But what are we doing now? We're sanctioned. We end up paying those sanctions, the American taxpayer. We don't accomplish the mission. We end up isolating ourselves. We make ourselves irrelevant. It's not a sustainable business model. I mean, we can't do it forever, but how many years do you have to strangle the Russian oil export market before the Russian economy blinks? That's the question you have to ask. But Trump is incapable of doing that. Now you've threatened the sovereignty of India, and India can't go for that. There's no way they can do that. If I wanted the Indians to break away from Russia, rather than saying you can't buy the S-400, I'd just say your next purchase will be THAAD, because we're going to offer to you great terms. We'll give it to you. We'll give you a THAAD. You want the best F-35? You want the F-35? You got it. Heavily subsidized. We're just going to throw them at you. And basically, you take the arms market away from the Russians. You take the oil market away from the Russians. Not by threatening anybody, just by going in there and outbidding them. I'm not saying it's 100% guaranteed of success, but there's a hell of a lot better chance of success. And the other thing you do there is now you create a problem, because India now starts buying American oil or oil not. And that BRICS relationship starts to get strained, starts to get frayed. And now you can start pulling India away, and you incentivize India to stay with the G20. And maybe one of the things you talk to the Indians about is, hey, how does G8 sound? That 8 used to belong to Russia. But what if we went G8 and that's you, big boy? Modi, Mr. G8. How's that look? If you want to break BRICS, you don't attack them all and force them to come together, which is what Trump is doing. You find the weak link, India, and you do whatever you need to bring the Indians out of BRICS. And when you do that, it starts to collapse. It's no longer, you take the Indian economy from BRICS, it's a huge hit. BRICS keeps bragging, justifiably so, about the fact that their total GDP is more percentage than theirs. But remove India from that, and that argument no longer flies. You got China's a big deal. But if BRICS is just seen as a Chinese play toy, that's not as attractive at this point in time as this multipolar entity. India brings an attractiveness in terms of other nations saying, yeah, we want to be part of that. That's why you see Thailand applying, Malaysia applying, Indonesia becoming a member. This is because of India, because of Indian membership. And so all Donald Trump's doing right now is guaranteeing that India now, when they look to where to go for help, it's going to be BRICS. They just made India a steadfast member of BRICS. I personally am happy. There's going to be a lot of people that are, shut up, Scott, don't tell Trump how to do he's not going to do it, guys, so don't worry about it. But I think it's time for a multipolar reality check. But I'm just saying that if I were advising the president and was told we want to achieve something, what the president's policy is achieving the exact opposite of what he wants to achieve. And what he's going to do is make America not the indispensable nation, but the irrelevant nation. I'm not going to pretend that it would be easy. I'm just saying that it might involve me covertly buying Venezuelan crude to replace the Russian oil. What I do is I find sources around the world that have crude that can replicate the specific chemical characteristics of the Russian crude so that the Indian refineries don't have to undergo these things. So yes, Belarus is now a nuclear power in terms of capability. It's destabilizing. It's stabilizing in a perverse way for Russia and Belarus because they needed to do it. You can't have Belarus out there hanging on by itself, where you got Poland and the Baltic states threatening it, by making sure that people know that if you attack Belarus, you trigger not just Belarus, but Russia, the Union State, and their dual nuclear arsenals. That provides guarantees of security for Belarus, but it's destabilizing. It's very nuclear weapons are not the solution. They're the problem. But the problem is the behavior of the United States have now made them the solution. Look, the Russians are only doing what NATO did all along with Turkey, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany. Nobody talks about the French and the British nuclear capability outside of NATO because they are independent. So the whole thing's changed. The nuclear non-proliferation treaty is out the window, along with everything else. Look at the Russians. I'm not blaming the Russians. Oreshnik. It's real now. It's not just a theory. It's real. It's being deployed. Belarus is getting it. It's a dual-use capable system. That's different. The SS-20 we knew was nuclear. With the Oreshnik, it can be nuclear and it can be conventional. How the hell do you deal with that from a arms control standpoint? And it's not the only one. Dmitry Medvedev hinted what I've been saying all along. There's going to be another family, or at least one, probably two more intermediate range missiles being deployed that will give Russia all the capacity it needs to deal with the threat that's emerging from the United States and NATO in terms of Dark Eagle and things of that nature. But, to bring Belarus into the nuclear club the way that they have. Everything has changed. Everything. Every red line that we thought couldn't be crossed was crossed. And the whole region is different now. We talked a lot about, and Professor Miranda, Iran can do a lot of damage to Israel. We all talked about that, but that was all hypothetical. Now we know it's real. We know that Iran is capable of doing a lot of damage to Israel. We know that air defense or missile defense systems don't work. We know that Iran is a hell of a lot more vulnerable to Israeli action than anybody thought they would be. We know a whole bunch of things that now allows us to put, in the past when we were trying to basically take one of those 1,000 piece puzzles and tell what it was with 15 pieces. All right, there's 15 pieces. Tell me what I'm looking at. I don't know. Yeah, I can speculate, but I don't know. It's only 15 pieces. We poured about 500 pieces on the board, and those pieces are connecting together. And I think now we're able to say, it looks like we're looking at a mountain scene with a river and a field of flowers. And that's probably what we're looking at now. There's a whole bunch more pieces of the puzzle on the table right now. And I think things are becoming much clearer. It's not a picture I wanted to see. I'm not one of these cheerleaders out there. They were like, Iran needs the bomb. The NPT no longer has any value. See, I was a big believer in the NPT. I was a big believer in international law. I was a big believer, and I still am, in the potential of it. But when the United States and Israel can get away with literal murder, with a Pearl Harbor event, with the lies, where's the shame? Telling the Iranians that we're going to have this negotiation and then allowing Israel to bomb them to try and kill the negotiating team along with the rest of. Where's the shame? No, I don't want Iran to have the bomb. I believe in getting rid of nuclear weapons, not promoting it. If this can be done in a way that the spread of nuclear capability is limited to Iran, and maybe this is what triggers Israel working on a solution to get rid of their nuclear weapons in exchange for Iran and verifying a nuclear-free zone. Okay, that's one way to get rid of the Israeli bomb. I think everybody's in agreement Israel shouldn't be allowed to have nuclear weapons. And it's a hell of the hypocrisy of saying it's okay for Israel to have it, turn a blind eye, but oh my God, if the Iranians get it. When it became clear to me the Iranians just didn't care about anything related to the inspectors, that part of their life was over and they're moving on to a new reality. Then there's no trap. Maybe it's a reverse trap. But now the Iranians have set in motion events that will inevitably lead to a military strike unless they deter it with a declared nuclear weapons capability. And I think that's the next step that's going to happen here. And I basically said that the Iranians have fallen into the inspection trap by not allowing the inspectors back in. They've set themselves up the way the Iranians set themselves, the Syrians set them up, so now they're at the mercy of inspections. The Iranian solution is to say, we don't care. We don't want them back. And we're not trying to get them back. And we're going to function without them. We no longer accept that scenario. What made inspections work with Saddam Hussein is that he wanted sanctions lifted. And the only way to get sanctions lifted was through an inspection-based outcome. The same thing with the Syrians. But the world's changed. Again, who predicted an Israeli surprise attack while the United States was negotiating? Where's the genius that said, I got that one. It's on my bingo card. Nobody predicted it.
No.
Nobody predicted. And when it happened, we all were doing the same thing. What? How could America do that? How could Donald Trump do that? And again, it comes back full circle. Steve Witkoff went to Russia.
Yeah.
You got to believe in the back of the Russians' mind, it's saying, we can't trust a word you're saying. You just sent 2 frickin' submarines closer to our shore armed with Trident nuclear-armed missiles. And now you want us to listen to you as if that's all going to come up. We don't trust anything you say. That's why the Oreshnik is operational. The Oreshnik is alive. That's why Dmitry Medvedev did the unprecedented thing of talking about dead hand, even though he said maybe it doesn't exist. You don't have a former president of Russia who knows damn well that the dead hand exists mention the dead hand unless he's telling you we got the dead hand. Trump is just screwed the pooch. That's a fighter term. It's not a dirty term. It's a fighter pilot term. But he's shooting himself down. He's shooting America down. But now we know. We know what the war looks like. We know what it is. Israeli bombing, Iranian missiles. We know it. We saw it. It's no longer theory. It's there. We crossed that river. So it's no longer saying it's really hard to conceive Israel and Iran fighting a war. No, it's not. They did it. And we know what it will look like. And it's going to happen again. That's the other thing is unless Iran does declare a functioning, viable, deliverable nuclear weapons capability, it will be bombed again by Israel and the United States. The only way to prevent that is a nuclear weapon. I've studied the Iranian nuclear program for a long time. I'm not claiming to be the world's best expert on it. I'm sure there's other people out there better on this than me, but I think I've got a good grasp of it. And I was getting ready to make the argument that even after all of this bombing, after all of this, that Iran shouldn't be viewed as a nuclear threat, that a case can be made that we can get Iran back to where the world should want them, which is a non-nuclear weapon state. And then I reread it and I let it sit and I reread it again. I don't believe that argument anymore. It's an argument I want to believe, but as an analyst and taking a look at the things, because they've been leaning in this direction for some time now. I made a statement before the bombing that Iran was a nuclear threshold state. And I believe that statement. And I made a statement that said that if the political decision had been made, Iran was weeks away from possessing a usable nuclear weapon. Either Iran possesses a usable nuclear weapon now, several of them, or they have advanced this even further to where they have everything, they just have to assemble the weapon. I believe they're beyond the enrichment aspect of it. I don't think Iran's shuttling around 60% enriched uranium, waiting for the IAEA to come back in and confirm it. And the Iranians can get away with a whole bunch of things. For instance, they can say, where's the 60% enriched uranium? You blew it up. It's underneath Ferdo, baby. Bring in the excavators. You dig it out. But they're not even going to do that. The Iranians, the way I knew that the Iranians have made this step is the way they're treating the IAEA. There will be no more inspections. There could be visits that will be guided to where Iran wants them to go, and Iran will take them to safeguarded facilities. But all the things we're talking about aren't safeguarded facilities because they're not going to be declared, and Iran will never declare them again to the IAEA because the IAEA turns that around. What I'm saying is I can no longer say in good faith that I don't believe Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon. The Iranians can prove me wrong, and I'm not condemning the Iranians. I'm on board with saying it is what it is, but it's a very risky thing right now. It's a very risky thing. And this is why this conversation is dangerous, because Trump is a madman, a literal madman. And if the Iranians declare a nuclear weapon, it's not ready to be used instantaneously and guaranteed outcomes, Trump will nuke them. But if the Iranians are able to say, Trump can nuke the whole country and we're still taking out Israel, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. That's deterrence. I didn't want it to get to this point. I didn't believe the Iranians would be able to make that transition without being detected, because I know what the IAEA is capable of doing. But we're in a unique situation. There hasn't been an IAEA inspector in Iran since the war started. And the Iranians aren't sitting on their thumbs. I think Iran has made the decision that they can only exist as a nuclear weapons state. And when the time comes, Iran will make that known. But I think in order for that time to come, they need some serious upgrades to their air defense and their air capabilities. And I believe they're getting that right now from the Russians and the Chinese. I hope I'm wrong. This is why I haven't even written it. Talking to you is a risk, because As on the internet, nothing ever goes away. And so this conversation, which is an honest conversation, a heartfelt conversation, may come back and bite me in the ass because they're going to say, you said this, that, and the other thing. There's silence about what's going on. In fact, you may have seen this. At first, I thought it was AI, but there was a member of parliament who's also a member of the security establishment who said Iran has a nuclear weapons program now. They've just come right out and said it. I'm like, that's not really the vector I want to hear it from. But you're not going to hear from the supreme leader until in order for this to happen, Iran has to present the world with a fait accompli and say, we have a nuclear weapons capability that can destroy all of Israel and you can't interdict it. And if you try, we kill all of Israel. Israel disappears. That's the reality we're at right now. I fought this. I don't like this. I don't think it adds, but I think we've given the Iranians no choice. When we launched a strike that didn't just target their nuclear facilities, but sought to decapitate them, regime change. What choice does the regime have right now? You can't go back to the status quo. You can't go back to allowing inspectors to run around inside Iran, knowing that those inspectors in the past, having seen what they saw, turned it into targets for the Israelis. The Israelis will just bomb again if the United States won't allow what international law allows. But this is also dangerous because from a non-proliferation standpoint, this could very well lead to the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region. That's another reason why I'm not happy about this. But I don't think the Iranians have a choice right now. They don't have a choice because before this, when we were talking about the theoretical possibility of a war,